Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the January meeting of Take Action San Diego. My name's Wendy Galernter. I'll be your host today, and I'll be joined by co-host Larry Stowell, who's in the participants list as Help Desk Larry. So if you have any questions, tech questions about what we present or seeing us on Zoom, please address those to Larry in the chat. And with that, I think we will get started. So again, welcome to our monthly meeting. Today is January 19th, 2025, and we are one day away from the inauguration of a fraudster, a rapist, a felon, a grifter, an insurrectionist. Um, Not a day that any of us wanted or maybe even imagined. And yet you are all here today. And I appreciate that so much because you're here to find out what we're going to talk about today, which is how we can take effective action in 2025. And there is effective action we can take. So let's get right into the meat of the meeting. First of all, please use the chat to say hello and tell us where you're coming in from. Our last few meetings, we've had an extraordinary number of people sign up, more than we've ever seen. We had to switch to a webinar form of Zoom in order to do that. So we can't really see each other, which is a downfall of that format. But the good news is it makes us able to have a bigger audience. And there are people from all over the country today, not just from San Diego, where we're from, but from Boston and from New York City and South Pasadena and Connecticut and so many other places. So thank you all so much for being here. And thank you especially to people who are here for the first time. Our agenda today is pretty simple. We're going to go over what we know today about this landscape that we find ourselves in, electoral, cultural, whatever, and what it means for the future, and especially the future of activism. We'll talk about our plans, this group's plans for 2025, some upcoming actions that you might be interested in, and then we'll have a Q&A and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. But we're going to wrap up about 5 o'clock Pacific time, so we'll just see what we can squeeze in. And when you, excuse me, when you do ask your questions, please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask your questions. When they come in the chat, there's enough people on this call that they just come down too fast, and it's too hard for our brains to capture. But in the Q&A, it's easier for us to capture those questions. So please do that. And while you're putting your name and where you're from into the chat, I just wanted to share some pictures of the People's March that I know a number of you were at in San Diego yesterday. It was a much bigger, much more joyous, much more diverse group than I expected. I went with a lot of skepticism, truthfully, and was really glad that I did go. Of course, it wasn't like the 2017 one, but that's okay. I think it was one more piece of evidence that our movement, our people, progressives, the left, Democrats, whatever we want to call it, we are there and we're ready to take action. And if any of you were at one of the marches yesterday, please let us know. And I think it was a good thing, but it's not the only thing that we're going to be doing in 2025. So there's the slide I was looking for earlier. There's the Q&A icon for when you have questions, please use that. And just 1 minute about our group, Take Action San Diego. We're a chapter of Swing Left, which is a national organization that whose main goal is to elect Democrats and progressives, especially in swing districts. The mission of our group is to drive positive change by supporting progressive candidates and policies, by taking action all year, not just around elections, um, and by giving people like you all the tools and the support you need to stay engaged at the national, state, and maybe even particularly at the local level. And we do that via our website, via a newsletter, an emailed newsletter that comes out about every 2 weeks about getting together to have joint actions like canvassing or just even some social time together. And by training, giving people training on some of the get out the vote tactics that are going to be important as time goes on. And before we get totally into the meat of the meeting, I also felt like we need to share some good news. Yet there are a lot of incredibly disturbing things happening. We all know it. It's why we're here. But there are some good things happening also. And I know you know about most of them. But just to remind ourselves that there is now a ceasefire and a hostage exchange going on between Hamas and Israel, that Joe Biden commuted the sentences of about 2,500 nonviolent drug offenders, that the wildfires, at least right now, are dying down, and that there was an incredible international response with firefighters from all over the world coming to help us, including from Canada, the Ukraine, and Mexico. I think that warmed a lot of our hearts. The Assad regime fell in Syria, and 256,000 jobs got added in December. And that's just, of course, a few things. But just so we feel that good things can still happen, even in this alarming state of affairs that we find ourselves in. So, what are some of the things we know today? It's not all that different than what we knew at the end of November, which is the last time this group met. Um, but they're pretty important things. And certainly one is that Trump did not win by a landslide or get a mandate. In the end, he won by about 1.5 points and not a majority, 49 point something percent. We know that even in states where Trump won, progressive candidates and initiatives won, and many down ballot races won with Democrats and progressives. So people split their votes. We also know, and maybe what's the overarching narrative for this election here, is that it wasn't just in America where an incumbent administration got voted out. It was just about every country in the world that had an election in the last year. And whether there was a left-wing government that was the incumbent government, as there was um, in France or here, or excuse me, not France, here, or whether there was a right-wing government in charge, as there was in the UK, they got voted out. And we suffered from that anti-incumbent mood also. And it was an anti-incumbent mood because people largely were not happy with the state of the world, the state of the economy, and the state of their lives. We also know, although we don't have an exact figure, that millions of Biden voters just stayed home. Or if they did vote, they didn't vote for president, or they voted for a third party candidate. And what that means, it was in the words of one of the writers I've been looking at, is that the US didn't really shift rightwards as much as it shifted couchwards. In other words, people just stayed home. Because they were uninspired, unsure, whatever. And so most of our fellow citizens are not MAGA warriors. They're people that I think we can talk to and hopefully inspire to come back and vote for Democrats in the future. I'm just going to look a little bit at what happened in Arizona because I think it parallels what happened in a lot of other states, which is it was a state that Biden narrowly won in 2020, um, and that Kamala lost by 5.5 points. How did that happen? GOV voter registration was incredible, especially among young Hispanic men. And GOP turnout was higher than Democrat turnout. Again, the couchword effect. And at the same time, all of that was happening, Democrat Ruben Gallego won the Senate race by 2.4 points, and the constitutional amendment safeguarding abortion won by 23 points. So was identity politics involved? Maybe because Gallego has a Hispanic last name, probably. But he also had a very strong economic message. He also did not tie himself to the incumbent administration, and therefore was able to succeed. And I think we saw that paralleled in many other states. We also know that Trump and the Republicans are governing by a very narrow margin. That Trump, even in what's considered the honeymoon period, which is right after the election when everybody thinks they like the candidate the most, he still has an overall unfavorable rating. That public opinion is against most of the goals of Project 25, which is kind of the roadmap for the MAGA right. That in the first 2 months after the election, or almost 2 months after the election, Trump's lost some pretty significant battles on Matt Gaetz's nomination, on John Thune becoming the head of the Senate, on some of the debt ceiling discussions, and that there has been this delicious infighting among Trump's so-called coalition. And there's going to be more of it, we're sure, which hopefully will put some sand in the gears of this terrible agenda that they want to enact. I also want to say a word about us and our movement. And if you read the papers, even on with writers who are on our side, there's a lot of words they're using. They all start with D for some reason. The left's demise, the left's disarray, the left's disorientation. That, we're just down and out and nobody's doing anything. And I want to paraphrase a quote, a famous quote of Mark Twain's, that reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I think reports of the left's demise have been greatly exaggerated. And perhaps it's because we are uncertain about exactly what form our activism is going to take in the future. We're not sure what horrible things Trump's going to enact. We're not sure how our legislators are going to perform, but we are motivated to act. And people showing up at this meeting today is one piece of evidence. If you've gone on any of the calls from Indivisible and Swing Left and Move On and many of the other progressive organizations, they've sometimes been overwhelmed with the number of people who show up. That's not a left that is in disarray. So we are motivated, but we do have to deal with the uncertainty of exactly how we're going to organize ourselves going into the future. And the other thing, which I kind of really mentioned already, is that many of our fellow citizens, even the ones who stayed home, even the ones who may have voted for Trump and then split their votes and voted for Democrats and the rest of the ticket, they are potential allies. Those are people that we can win back. And that's going to be a big part of our job in the coming months and years. We also still have a lot of questions, and there's that uncertainty that I was talking about. We know the Democratic Party, and we know that progressives and people like us want to learn what we can from this election about what we could be doing better in the future. We have been labeled now a group of college-educated elites. We appear to have lost some working class voters, whether for legitimate reasons or not. But the Democratic coalition needs to be broader, and we hopefully have a role to play in that because we need to do that in order to engage the Democrats who didn't vote. And we need to understand, and this is really important for all of us, because I know how many phone calls, how many doors knocked, how much money, how many letters, how many postcards did everybody write? We want to know which of those methods worked, which of them didn't, and how they could be fine-tuned in the future. And we may be able to get some partial answers. We're not going to get full answers. It's always hard uh, in this kind of environment to exactly know which were the most effective methods, and it's why we frequently just do everything. But mid-year, or hopefully sooner than mid-year this year, each state will release what's called the voter files, and that shows who voted, doesn't say how they voted, but who showed up to vote, what Democrats, what independents, and what Republicans. All the information we have right now about the electoral landscape is based on exit polls, and those are kind of notoriously unreliable. It's all we've got right now. But the voter files are going to be much more specific. And a number of organizations with interest in the idea of what get out the vote tactics work um, actually set up controlled research studies where a certain tactic, it could be a certain kind of a letter or a certain kind of a door knock message, was tested by dividing a population in half and not doing that tactic to one half and doing the tactic to the other. And then we'll be able to evaluate which tactics had the greatest impact on turning out voters and whether or not some of the tactics we used can be refined or even reimagined to be more effective in the future. So this has been a big topic for this group. We've had researchers involved in talking to us about how they conduct this research and what kind of results they show up with. So we will be addressing this in the future because we want to be as effective as possible. We don't just want to keep doing the same old things just because it's what we've done before. So stay tuned. So our plans for 2025, there's kind of four pieces of it, right? The first is rapid response and getting organized to rapidly respond to the MAGA agenda. The second part is getting involved in elections. There are a few special and off-year elections occurring in 2025. And then in 2026, we have a chance, and a very good chance, according to the experts, of taking back the House. But in addition to kind of responding against the MAGA agenda, we also want to show what we are for, and not just what we're against. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And then finally, some coping strategies for us so that we can stay sane and even joyful about our lives amidst a very difficult period of time. So, number one, rapid response to the MAGA agenda. The target here is our elected officials. And one of the ways we are going to conduct this piece of our activism are through these take action alerts. We just sent out our first one a few days ago. These are going to be emailed to you, and they contain 3 or 4 things that are urgent that we want you to hopefully to implement on your own. And for example, a lot of the action alerts are going to involve calls to our legislators to either get them to vote a certain way on a bill or to comment on something that's happening in the country or the world. So these are going to be emailed when there's an urgent rapid response called for. We're going to be calling Democrats and Republicans. And for people who have questions about whether it's worthwhile calling Democratic legislators, the answer is absolutely 100% yes. We're already seeing that some of them are losing their spines in the face of kind of the trifecta in Washington, and they need to be bolstered up. And even those who are the most progressive and the most reliable need to hear from us, to hear our thanks and our support for them. And of course, if your representatives are Republicans, they need to know that people are watching them and that some of these awful votes they're going to take will be publicized and critiqued. Phone calls are something that we really hadn't emphasized in the past all that much, but in an era where we are in the opposition, for Washington, D.C. especially, phone calls are essential. And we have had any elected representative that's come to talk to us, any staffer from a legislative office that's come to talk to us. They tell us the phone calls work. They tally down on any given issue how many yeses, how many nos they get, and it influences the way these electeds uh, go about their days. It's important to call them early before they've committed to a public stance because it's hard for them to back down sometime once they've made their opinions known. So phone calls are quick and we can get to them as soon as possible before they kind of go public with what they're going to say. The email's good. I'm not critiquing it at all to legislators, but phone calls have more impact. And kind of the way legislators' offices seem to look at this is whatever takes more effort on our part is what they pay more attention to. So emails are easier, phone calls are just a little bit harder. And of course, phone calls are faster than mail or postcards. Also good tactics, but for an urgent, rapid response, phone calls work the best, and they are easy. Um, Generally, you don't need a long thesis. You just need to say, I'm urging you to vote no on the Lake and Riley bill because it's anti-immigrant and anti-American. And that's it. Um, you can call daily for important issues. They typically don't even know who you are when you call, just that you're a constituent. And we're making it even easier to find out the names and the phone numbers of your representatives. And so actually, I'm going to shift my focus now over to Larry, who's going to give you a little demo on how to use some of the tools we have on our website to get contact information and then make those calls.
All right. On the left side, this is our web page, and there's an actions and events section on the left side. If you just click on actions and events, it will bring you to a page that lists the actions. And what we're talking about doing today is to look at a form that helps you keep track of who you're going to send or call, who you're going to call, and how you find those outs. This is the handy form here. And I'm going to slide it over to this side of the page. And with that information, I filled out a few at the top. You can find those senators and your representatives by clicking on this top link. And it will take you to a page from Common Cause. And if you scroll down the page, uh, you'll have an option to enter your address. This is the library, Pacific Beach Library that I put in here just to use that as an example. Click Submit, and it will show you all of your federal, state, and local officials and their phone numbers. So it's a very easy way to get to each one of these. And you can simply fill out the form on the opposite page. If you just triple click on someone like Newsom, you say copy. And if you just go to the form and you paste it in here, saying that Governor of California, copy, paste, and the phone number. Oops. You'll have a record of these for future use. I'm just going to make the call to Adam Schiff, and let's go back here. And the call was the action is to contact your senators and urge them to block the dangerous nominations of qualified extremists, Kash Patel. I've got Adam Schiff, sorry, actually in my phone because once I put it in, I called him one time. I'm able to call him again real easily. So let's just go ahead and give him a call.
Hi, it's Senator Adam Schiff, the great state of California. Thank you so much for calling my office. My staff are on other calls at the moment, but if you'd like to share your views on an issue, or if you need assistance with a federal agency, please leave a message at the tone and include your name, address, email address, and telephone number so that we can get back to you. You can also send me a written message through my website at schiff, schiff.senate.gov. I look forward to hearing from you, and thanks again for calling.
Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or press pound for more options.
Hello, my name's Larry Stoll. I'm calling from San Diego in the area code 92109. My email address is takeactionsandiego@gmail.com. And I'm calling to encourage you to block the dangerous nominations of Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, and RFK Jr., and Russ Voigt. Thank you. That's all it takes. It's a very quick process, and you're done. And with this form on the other page that opens up, if you just close your browser, it should ask you if you want to save this document, and you can just easily hit save, and it'll save it into something like your downloads folder or wherever you want to save it on your computer. And that's about it. So let me turn this back to Wendy.
Got myself unmuted. Thank you, Larry, and hopefully you can use that form, store it on your computer. You can print it out. You can even print out the blank form and write that information in by hand. And then, as Larry said, of course, once you've made a call to one of these people, you can add their name and phone number to your contacts on your phone, and then it's even more automated to give them a call. Okay. One other quick thing talking about rapid responses, and that is that in addition to some of the urgent things we're going to be asking of you all to do, there are some very large organized challenges and responses going on to the MAGA agenda. And whether that's organizations like ACLU or Democracy Forward, who have been assembling and are prepared for legal challenges, and they've sort of used the Project 2025 paper as a kind of a blueprint for how they should be prepared, to this governors group that formed soon after Trump was elected to coordinate with each other how, at least in the blue states where these governors are from, they can resist some of the worst of the MAGA agenda. So there's that kind of stuff going on a large scale, as well as what we are doing together on a smaller scale. So another facet of what we're doing are elections, as we always have done. And in this case, of course, we're not targeting the MAGA agenda, we're targeting voters. And there will be a few elections in 2025. And then, of course, we want to gear up for the 2026 congressional elections. But the interesting thing about these special and off-year elections is that they are the kinds of elections that Democrats are probably going to do pretty well in. First, because the general mood, I think, of the voters, as we saw with the split ticket scenario for the presidential election versus the down ballot election, the general mood of voters is not full bore MAGA in most cases. Lots of Democrats and progressives were favored in down ballot races, even in November. It turns out special elections are elections that high information voters are most likely to vote in, college educated voters. And of course, that's now the core of the Democratic Party, which isn't a great thing, if that's the only people we've got in our party, and it isn't. But because we are so heavily populated by that group, those people are much more likely to show up in an off year or a special election. And this chart kind of illustrates that. So there was a special election in January, just a week or two ago, actually, just to replace a few of their seats in their legislature, where people got promoted and got new jobs and moved to other seats. So there were 3 vacancies in these 3 districts. And if we just sort of go across this top line in this House 26 district, in November, Democrats did well, and even Harris did well, Kamala did well by 22.1 points. But in this January election for just a House legislature, Democrats did even better by a shift of about 2.7 points. And that was the case in all 3 of the elections that took place in January, and even in this very red area of Virginia, where they knew a Democrat wasn't going to win. But Trump won there by 26 points. And in the January election, their senatorial candidate won by 15.6, so a 10.5 point shift. So just sort of an illustration of what we kind of know already, that Democrats are better poised to do well in these 2025 elections. And here are some that are coming up. One is one we didn't used to pay attention to an election like this. This is the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin. A lot of you may remember a very big campaign to get Janet Protasiewicz elected to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin last year. It was a very successful campaign. She won by a lot, and at that point shifted the majority in that court to Democrats. Well, now someone else is retiring, and Susan Crawford is running to replace that person. She's a Democrat. She's been very involved in representing Planned Parenthood, labor unions. She's a big voting rights advocate. And what we're hoping is, if we didn't spend all of our money in the November election, that even $5 or $10 to her campaign could make a big difference. And I failed to say this earlier. We're recording this, and the link to everything we're saying and the video will go out to you in a follow-up email tomorrow, as well as in the text of our email. We'll have all the links that we're talking about, and we'll give you information about how to get involved with her campaign if that is of interest to you, and I hope it is. Another election that we're looking at is November 4th, so quite a ways off, but 2025, where the Virginia and the New Jersey governor and state legislature will be voted on. And at least in Virginia, there's a very good candidate running for governor. She would replace Glenn Youngkin, who is a Republican, a very what's the word I want to use? He's a respectable looking MAGA guy. He sounds good, but he's really horrible. She has a good chance. Now, he's termed out. There'll be another Republican running, but she has a good chance in this election. She, you may remember, has been in the Congress in the past, and she was elected in 2018, the first Democrat since 1968, and the first woman ever to win in that congressional district in Virginia. So you'll be hearing a lot more about her campaign and some of the other November races in the months to come. And I think what we want to do is even think about exactly which tactics we want to use to support her. Of course, money always works, but I think we'll be following up on those November races with some more specific information on what we think are the most effective tactics for supporting her candidacy and others. And then, of course, taking back the House in 2026, that would be a November election in 2026. Republicans now have the narrowest House majority they've had in 100 years. Voters tend to turn against the party that's in power, so Democrats are poised better there. There's a lot of unpopular measures that the Republicans are going to try to squeeze through in the next 2 years, and which will be very publicized by the likes of us to remind people what the values of that side are. And that gives us some even more time to finesse and evaluate which get out the vote tactics we want to really focus on. But it's a very positive development and a very positive set of campaigns that we can get involved in. Of course, every congressperson is up for re-election every 2 years, so we will be voting all of them in. The Senate, much less likely we can get that back in 2026, although there may be some important races there that we'll want to get involved in. So in addition to what we are against, we need to show our communities, our neighbors, our friends, and the country what we are for. And this has been a critique of the anti-Trump left, that we've just been so anti-Trump that we failed to communicate what our values are and what kind of world we want to live in, as opposed to the MAGA world. And that's a whole, I mean, what that democratic platform is and what those values are, of course, is a big discussion that that party is having right now, and that I think we can have also. For very shorthand, I'm going to use FDR's 4 freedoms, because they pretty much cover the most important aspects of what I think we're for, which is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And as the opposition party, as the group of people who are not in power now, we don't have a lot of leverage to get our agendas through on the large national scale. We can stop some things, hopefully. But at a local level, we do have that ability. And I think a big part of what we're thinking about for the coming years is to really amp up our efforts in our local communities around issues that are important to people of all types, or a lot of people anyway. And that could be anything from criminal justice reform to quality public education, to making sure there are no book bans, to protecting immigrants, and the list goes on. And this kind of advocacy involves, again, calling and keeping in touch with our local elected representatives, but it also probably involves more in-person interaction, because we can go to school board meetings. We can go to the libraries and ask what we can do to help them. We can contact local immigrant rights organizations and ask what we can do to help. And so I think this is where we get to show what we are for and what kind of values we have, and hopefully make some progress because we have a chance, especially in blue states, but not necessarily only. And to that point, I want to kind of promote the speaker at our next meeting. This is an independent journalist named Jessica Pishko. Some of you may have seen a recent article she had in the New Yorker magazine, or are aware of a book she wrote last year called The Highest Law in the Land. But she has been studying county sheriffs for many years. And her basic thesis is they are an unregulated, incredibly powerful force in law enforcement, and under a Trump presidency can really potentially be mobilized to be the implementers of some of his worst policies, including mass deportations. But she's also really studied what citizens can do to bring this to light in their local communities and interact in their local communities to try to understand how their sheriffs are operating and how they can influence how those sheriffs operate themselves. So I was thrilled when she said yes, that she would talk to us. She told me she doesn't charge a fee. She will talk to progressive groups who ask her if she's at all able. So I really encourage you to come to this. And she's very familiar with a number of situations, including the one here in San Diego with our sheriff, who is an on-paper Democrat, but who has operated very much as a MAGA light sheriff so far. But sort of continuing with this idea of giving people the information and the tools to get involved locally and show what we're for, our upcoming meetings are going to feature speakers who are school board representatives, library representatives, union representatives, among others, to talk about, again, local action. So we will, of course, keep you updated on all those speakers and dates as time goes on. And then just to pencil in something, our group generally meets on Zoom because we're kind of distributed over a wide geographic area. But we do meet in person about twice a year, and tentatively, our next in-person meeting is May 16th, so you can pencil that in. Fourth and last part of what we're going to be involved in is just coping with this era, which isn't going to be easy. And the target of that is us, you, me, everybody. And at the risk of sounding incredibly sappy, I'm going to advocate for the idea of kindness. There were a lot of people holding signs at the march yesterday, the People's March yesterday, about kindness. And I recently came across an interview on NPR by the two authors of this book that's shown here, Good People, Stories from the Best of Humanity. That there's over 100 very short essays, and they've been collecting these stories over several years, documenting these small acts of kindness that people do, and really also demonstrating how these small acts have what they call a triple ripple effect. So when you do something nice, like let someone with a few groceries get in front of you in the line, it kind of makes you feel good to do it. It certainly makes the person that you've let in front of you in the line feel good. And anyone around you who sees that also feels good. And I think even those very small things, and that was a very small one, kind of make us all feel that we're not enemies and we're not divided, and that we have more in common with each other than not. And yeah, the Christian nationalists and of course, and that's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about most of the people, though, that are our neighbors and our friends in our community. So I will send you the link to the 9-minute interview, or if you're interested in the book. But it's just trying out a little bit of kindness, which I'm sure you do now anyway, but maybe more consciously think about it going forward, because I think it's going to help me stay sane to feel that connection with other people that I don't even know sometimes. Another coping strategy, which I'm sure you have all heard of, is practicing what they call information hygiene. Kind of figure out which news you want to keep track of, if any at all, and really curate your news sources. Go with the ones that you feel are giving you the information that you need. And we have a resource list on our website. Again, I'll send those links in the follow-up email that has a long list of independent journalism sources that you might be interested in addition to the obvious ones like MSNBC. And then I know some people are going to watch the inauguration, a lot of other people, including me or not. That's a completely personal decision. But for people who are going to ignore it, there's plenty of other things you can do. I mean, you can volunteer at a soup kitchen, you can go to a Martin Luther King parade, you can call somebody just to say hello that you haven't talked to in a long time. Just keep in mind, please, that I think our mental health is going to be challenging and that we need to be taking care of ourselves so we can stay as active as possible also. And that leads me to another coping strategy, which is taking action, and lots of quotes along those lines. Action is the antidote to despair. That's Joan Baez. And then a quote from Timothy Snyder, who wrote the book on tyranny, which some of you may be familiar with. But democracy is about 1 million people doing 1 million little things. And yeah, there's millions of us out there. And if we all do 1 million little things, we're going to make some progress, I promise. And our website, as Larry said, has all those upcoming actions. We update it at least every week. And you also get action alerts when something really urgent happens. Keeping with that, just some upcoming actions you might want to be aware of. One is to make the call that Larry just made, which is to call your 2 senators and urge them to block the nominations of Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, Kash Patel, Russ Vought, RFK Jr., or whichever ones you hate the most and think are the most dangerous. We also think calling your senators to urge them to demand a full Senate access to Pete Hegseth's FBI background check. Right now, that's being held closely, and senators who have to vote on his nomination do not get to see it yet. We want you to also call your Congress members this time, not your senators, and urge them to vote no on the Laken Riley Act. And this is an act you may have heard a lot about. It's named after this woman that was terribly murdered in Florida. It was a total performative bill that the Republicans put together last year, pretty much to just parade every anti-immigrant thing they could think of. They actually never expected it to be taken up seriously. But once Trump won and had the Senate and the House, they revived it. And unfortunately, a lot of our Democratic senators sort of caved in and brought it to the floor. It looks like it may pass in the Senate, which is horrible. But it will now go back to the Congress. And so we urge you to call your Congress members and tell them to vote no on this unconstitutional anti-immigrant bill. And again, we'll send you links on a script that you can use to make that call with. For those of you not on social media, I'm going to urge again to start thinking about getting active on social media, whichever platform you want to use, because getting some of this information out about promises that Trump hasn't kept, about terrible votes that the Republicans are making, or about good things that we're accomplishing. Social media is going to be a place to communicate a lot of that. And finally, for people who are in the San Diego area, I would urge you on February 1st to go to the 7th annual Women of Color Roar Breakfast. This is a huge community event here in San Diego, attended usually by 400 or 500 people from all walks of life. It honors the achievements of women of color, and it also provides support to young women who want to get involved in government and in activism. You have to buy a ticket to it. It is a breakfast, but I will send you the link to buy a ticket, and I will be there. Hope to see some of you there too. I'm going to finish up just with a quote from Martin Luther King, whose birthday we'll be celebrating tomorrow. Of course, he has so many great quotes, but we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. And then a quote from Jimmy Carter, the most, I think, underestimated president in my lifetime. Someone we all, I think, came to appreciate much more after he left office. But let us learn together, laugh together, work together, and pray together, confident that in the end we will triumph together in the right. So I think those are good words to end this with.